Hello and welcome to Past Your Bedtime. My name's Bev. Before I begin, I want to say a big thank you to you, the audience, as I've marked a small milestone in reaching 100 subscribers. I'm thoroughly enjoying speaking to so many interesting people, gaining an insight into agriculture and its stories, innovations and challenges, often driven by rapid changes in tech, policy and climate. Knowing that you're out there listening each week is both terrifying and thrilling. So thank you. If you haven't subscribed as yet, I hope you'll consider it because it really helps me find out more and allows others a platform to share their experiences. On today's episode, I'm talking to Laura Awdry, a native New Zealander who, by a happy accident, ended up putting roots down here in the UK in 2009 after her big overseas adventure. Today, her and husband Sam are tenant farmers for the Duchy of Cornwall on 800 acres, running their dairy beef system. You may have seen in the press recently news of the Duchy selling off parts of its estate. The news broke after our recorded conversation, but I caught up with Laura later. In her words, they're safe so far, but it does add some tension, typically understated from Laura. Being only 3.5 years into their 20-year tenancy agreement, you don't need to be a genius to realise that they're only just starting to reap any rewards from their initial outlay in terms of getting the farm established in its new system. Sadly, this is one more example of the uncertainty that can befall a farmer. But whatever the future holds for this farming couple, I'm pretty sure their tenacity and energy will see them weather the storms, and Cornwall has seen plenty of those so far. We kick off by discussing just that. It's been a while since I first linked in with you, and then you were busy through the back end of last year. There was an awful lot going on with the storms. I can't remember if that was before Christmas or after. It was
it's just been
horrific.
And then we had storms, and then I was away for a course, and then we've just hit calving. So it's just life's like a roller coaster at the moment.
Yeah,
And there was Nuffield. It was Nuffield Conference towards the end of the back year, and then you have
yes.
Christmas, and then all of a sudden it's just you just feel like you're on the go all the time, and there's never a free moment. So
No, and here we are now, a week away from the clocks going forward and British summertime.
mm, let's hope it actually comes this year. So.
So you're a long way from home, original home, I'm guessing, by your accent. What,
Yes.
if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about how you ended up here and what do you find the major differences between here and home?
Yeah, well, so it's definitely not a Cornish accent. You're correct. Hails from a lot further south. So New Zealand. I was born and bred in New Zealand in Canterbury. Grew up in a small town called Methven. And actually come from a background of deer farming. So Dad still farms over in Canterbury. We run sort of red deer, so nothing to do with cows or calves or anything that I currently do. Completely different. And I yeah, I actually didn't like farming or want anything to do with farming growing up. So I agriculture was probably the lowest priority on my agenda, and all I wanted to do was finish high school, go traveling, go to uni, and get out of small town Methven, and just kind of see the world, I suppose. And
Isn't that every Kiwi
yeah,
like
well,
objective, right? Of ones I've worked with.
yeah, well, you say that. So it's actually, I always joke to people, there's something we call our big OE, which is we call it a big overseas experience. So you either finish high school and go straight to uni, or you finish high school and you take 2 years out. And most of us probably end up in London. It's kind of like a rite of passage
Yeah.
almost. Over the years, there's always little Kiwi communities over in London. And then, we work for a bit and then go backpacking, go traveling around Europe. And that was my plan. And he's my now husband, obviously. He was traveling at the same time, so he'd finished uni in his gap year and was in New Zealand traveling, and I was just leaving. So we kind of met while he was over here working. I was heading over to go work and travel. And yeah, about I can't believe I'm telling this story. 2 weeks before I was leaving the country, we found out I was pregnant. So And that was 18 years ago now. So yeah, it was obviously one of those meant to be moments, but it definitely turned what was meant to be a very short trip for 2 years abroad into a permanent move to the UK. So that's kind of how I ended up here to begin with. So yeah, it wasn't quite how I thought it was going to work out with all this fun traveling and working and things like that. But we ended up with the most amazing daughter out of it. And she's now just turned 17, which I still can't believe where that time's gone.
Gosh, I think 17 years ago I was working in London about that time. I just don't know where the years have gone. I really don't. So you're down in Cornwall. Tell us a bit about the farm and where you're from and what you farm.
Yeah, so we moved to Cornwall, it'd be about 3.5 years ago. So originally, when we first came over here, we were in Wiltshire, and my husband's family farm was very much sort of a suckler, arable, but his father also ran a contracting business. But we, very quickly, the livestock and the cattle were our thing, and that was kind of always what we wanted to do. So 3.5 years ago, well, actually it was longer than that now, it was 4.5 years ago when the tenancy got advertised. We saw a 20-year farm business tenancy with the Duchy of Cornwall. So we took a gamble, applied for that tenancy, and it was very much, it was quite scary because you're obviously, you're leaving a family business. But equally, you're kind of starting from scratch again because quite often when you're in a family business, you don't have a huge amount of assets and like capital behind you.
Mm.
So yeah, we kind of invested everything we could basically to go into this tenancy, crossed our fingers, and yeah, really luckily we got it. Really big move, and where we are now, we're sort of about 20 minutes from Truro. So if you know Cornwall, we're sort of about halfway down. Very different landscapes, obviously. Wiltshire was very much more arable focused, a lot drier. Cornwall's this kind of really interesting maritime climate. So for us as beef farmers, that we grow a lot of grass, which is obviously really key for our business as well. And I guess yeah, the background. Well, for me, getting into farming here, for someone who didn't want to farm, when you've got a young family and kids, it's really hard when you don't have family and childcare. So about 2011, I rented a shed and started contract calf rearing. So my farming venture started in a shed that was sort of 110 foot by 45 foot. And I just used to rear batches of 100 calves at a time. And that was kind of, how I got my foot in the door, learned about, obviously, well, I had no background in dairy, I had no background in beef. So you were kind of learning a new skill with animal husbandry, and calf rearing is quite yeah, it was a bit of a baptism by fire because you're learning about obviously a completely different animal or livestock than you used to. I use that skill set, and obviously we've used that to develop our business that we have today. So what we do today is we work directly with dairy farmers. So we rear about 850 calves a year, and we generally work with block calving dairy farms. So as these spring and autumn block calvers are calving, we will be taking their beef calves off their farm. So sort of 300 calves at a time. And we take those through, we rear them up until about sort of 3.5 months of age when they're weaned. And then we keep some of them ourselves on the farm. So obviously we keep and finish some ourselves, but we've also got a couple of other local farmers who they just want to buy sort of 50 to 80, weaned calves at a time that they can take through on their own farm and finish as well. And that's kind of how we've developed our business. Yeah, working directly with dairy farms, rearing calves up and keeping them through to finish. And then we've also got a small suckler herd alongside that as well, because we do still like the suckler cows. And I think the way our farm is split. We've got sort of kind of rough, hilly ground, slightly unimproved permanent pasture, and it really lends itself naturally to sort of mob grazing and being able to sort of incorporate that and that biodiversity aspect. I think with sucklers works really well, and then obviously being able to focus on some of the more it was like ex-vegetable land and arable land, and we've put that all down into herbal lays, and we have like quite a productive grazing system.
So for someone who wasn't interested in getting involved in farming then, what turned it into a future that you could see that you could enjoy and thrive in?
Oh, well, yeah, helps getting married to a farmer, I suppose. But to be fair, it's very easy to be, well, I'm going to say this again. It's actually not very easy to be the daughter-in-law sometimes, I think, in farming businesses, and that's probably not spoken about enough, actually. It's quite challenging, I think, when you marry into a farming business.
Mm.
and you are trying to fit in, and obviously you want to help and you want to be involved, but you never quite feel, you have a voice, so you're able to sort of take that step into the business. And I suppose it was getting that sort of car ferrying business and starting that up and realizing that I really enjoyed that. That was kind of, I saw that there could be a future in that. And I think, I didn't have a background in sort of beef or dairy, but I guess I've always loved the land. Like I grew up on a farm, and my dad was really sort of focused on soil health, grassland management. I mean, my childhood was spent collecting seaweed and brewing in IBCs and making foliar fertilizer. Now, this is about 25 years ago, back before it was all in vogue. So
Uh-huh.
Dad was ahead of his time there. So I'd always grown up with sort of understanding soil, natural science, and those are my subjects I loved at school: biology, geography, um, all those sorts of subjects. So I think when you learn that farming can also basically be like a living science class, that's kind of, I think, when things, can click for you, because you're not, I think we just view farming as farming, but you're an accountant, you've got to look after the land, you've got to look after the soil, you've got to basically know basic science, animal husbandry, like it's a bit like being a vet. There's so many things within farming and agriculture that I don't know if you know about sometimes when you're younger. And I think when you
Yeah.
can kind of see that and pull it all together and go, well, this is an amazing diverse job, I can do all those things in one day, it's really fulfilling. It's quite exciting. So
I think this is a really important conversation. I was listening to one of the podcasts this morning when I was getting ready, and talking about the need for positivity in the conversation around farming, not to denigrate the conversations that have to be had about the challenges, but if you don't explain the positives and the diversity of opportunity in the industry of farming, you're in danger of putting them off, because the future generation will just kind of hear the downside. And it's finding that balance. I think I've certainly found people really open to explaining what it is they do. And I guess because my background was in account management, I always had to do a little investigation into clients' businesses, so that I could have the conversation, in respect of whatever I was selling. So for me, I find that it's kind of muscle memory, just to sort of dig in, find out what's going on in their world, that sector, and then start asking the questions. So
yeah.
so yeah, what you say there sort of comes through loud and clear, that you identified immediately that this is going to fill your mind with opportunity and ideas and different ways that you could apply it.
Yeah, I think I'm a really practical person as well. I like to be hands-on. I like to solve problems, and I think every day you're problem solving in farming and agriculture. And that's whether or not you're like hands-on farming, or whether you're working in like ancillary industries. You're generally always trying to like solve a problem, because it's not like every day is the same in farming. You're going to have the same routines. I'm always going to feed the calves twice a day, or you're going to milk, 2, 3 times a day, or once a day, depending on your system. So you're always going to have a couple of those things that, they are the non-negotiables that happen at those times. But there's generally always stuff that is different. We've had the wettest weather. Well, this has been the wettest winter I can remember. And everybody tells us that it definitely has been in Cornwall. I kind of just thought, is this a one-off?
Yeah.
So you're having to constantly be really creative and problem solve, and be reactive, I think. And so that's kind of also the fun part about farming as well, is getting to react and kind of, yeah, build resilience and things into your system. So yeah, no 2 days are the same. You might do some of the same jobs on the same days, but everything's a little bit different. So yeah, we probably don't talk about just the I don't know, the skill set you need, I suppose, in agriculture quite often. And I think you were saying about the younger generation. When I was traveling around America, there was a ranch I went to, and he was, what was he saying? He was like, we can't talk down about farming, because if we talk down about farming, we're negative about it, the next generation don't want to come in and take this on, do
Exactly.
they?
Yeah.
And I feel, having traveled a lot recently, I do wonder if we are in a bit of a negativity loop in the UK. We're very, very negative, and we're constantly kind of looking at all these things like, oh, it's the government, or it's this, or it's Labour, or it's that.
How
And
long
at
have
the
you
end of
been
the
here? You only just realised that.
well, Oh gosh, no. So there's a terminology in New Zealand we used to call English people who immigrated or farmed or came over. I'm probably gonna get so much hate for saying this, but we used to call you guys POMs, prisoners of Mother England, but we used to call you whinging POMs.
Yeah,
And
whinging
I,
pops, absolutely. We know this. We've
well, I
we've got
kind of
other
yeah.
names for you, don't worry.
That's fine, don't worry. I'm yeah, definitely probably also earned. But no, I get that name now and I think we're very good here at just always finding someone else to blame or not wanting to solve a problem or finding negativity. And at the end of the day, if you keep yourself in that mindset and that loop, you're never gonna progress. And I think you've just got to go, do you know what? This is my farm business. I am going to make it successful. I'm going to do this. And I think you just sometimes have to crack on and do that because you could be sitting there waiting to wonder about what's the government going to do? What's this grant going to be? At the end of the day, you're the one in control of your business and the costs and the finances. We can't control what happens in the Mideast. We can see that right now, but we
Yeah.
can make sure that our business is really resilient to those external shocks and stuff. So, yeah, I think that mindset thing's key, massively key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had the good fortune to talk to Dr. Louise Manning, who presented at the OFC conference with her paper on the opportunities in farming, and and she said the same thing. If I were to look at what the challenges are and talk to those challenges, there's so much material out there about what the issues are. You run the risk of just getting bogged down into a so what moment. Well, these are the challenges. So what? How are we going to solve them? And so she sort of flipped it on her head for her paper. So it's really, really interesting to hear that perspective from an academic who's desperately trying to come up with practical tools and methods for people to apply. Because I can't begin to comprehend how you find the headspace to sit and solve and strategize about some of the issues facing farming, because it's non-stop, from from early in the morning to late at night, on a normal day, not to mention when there's sort of weather systems that blow through and blow half your barns down. How did you cope in that storm season? I mean, let's hope it's the end of the storm season, but I know I can't remember the name of the pretty big one that blew through.
Oh yeah, we've to be fair, it was since we've moved down here, I think in the last 18 months we've had like six named storms that have caused like quite severe damage down this way. And we did get away a lot lighter than other farmers. There's a dairy farmer I know down the Lizard and like his entire dry cow pens and collecting yards and cubicle shed housing all blew off. And for us, it was just trees. We had trees down everywhere. And the trouble is that when you're a grazing livestock farm, when trees come down and take out your fences, all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's the clear up of you need the time to be able to clear the trees to be able to then rebuild the fence and just ahead of the grazing season. And because we do out winter as well, we had a lot of trees come down in that out wintering block where the cows are out, obviously during winter. So, it's just at the time of the year when it's all a bit crap and muddy and wet, the last thing you want to do is be out trudging around putting out thousands of meters of electric fencing again to try
Yeah.
and stop the cows getting out. But yeah, I think I don't know the weather. I think we're always going to have severe weather, and it's just I don't know, trying to be as resilient as you can and having backup plans. And it's always good to have backup plans, I think, in farming. So I think we've just learnt with the way the weather is at the moment that we've always got contingency. So you might plan for this, but I think unless you build yourself a buffer, we'll always make sure that there's extra fields that we've got that we could use as deferred grazing if the weather's gonna, come in really bad for a month or something like that and muck up our plans. And then, I mean, the challenge for us as being a tenant farm, and we're only 3.5 years in, we've pretty much just you're just chucking money at like something that needs a lot of work to begin with. So, we've had to fence the whole farm from scratch. We're still not finished fencing. And you can't really afford to put extra capital into repairing sheds or building sheds. So you're kind of working with what you've got and you have to be really creative with what you've got and still like run a business from it as well. So
Mm.
it's just always about trying to look for that flexibility in the system and not boxing yourself into too much of a corner. But yeah, storm wise, I think this year we're trying to be really proactive and anything that we think is going to cause a problem, coming into maybe November. It seems to be like November through to February, we get these really strong winds. I think we're just going to try to proactively take out any over, hanging trees, things that we think might come down potentially. And yeah, I don't know, touch wood. Yeah, touch wood. The sheds have been okay. There's a few missing roof lights and things that need replacing, but yeah, we weren't as hit as some farmers were down this way.
Yeah. So you mentioned you've got an 18-year-old daughter. You've got more kids than that, right? I think you've
Yeah.
got quite the brood.
I stopped at 3. I decided if I needed to buy a new vehicle because I couldn't fit them all in the back seat, then yeah, that was probably the time to stop. Yeah, no, I've got 3 kids. So yeah, Amelia, she's just started her first year of A levels. So she's in college now. My middle one is 12. She's the farming man child. She was the one that, yeah, she was actually nearly born on the calf shed. That was always the joke, basically. I was in labour weighing and vaccinating calves, and I had her at hospital 2 hours later. So people always joke that's why she's the farming man child. She was brought up in a calf shed. And then my youngest, we've got a son. He's 10 basically. So, but yeah, he's a 10-year-old boy, the third child. He's got 2 older sisters, so probably says a lot about his character. Birth order there.
And do you intend for them to take on the business of farming when they're old enough to see that in them? I guess it might be quite difficult to predict for a
Yeah.
10-year-old.
Well, I mean, for us, we're a farm business tenancy, so we've got a 20-year tenancy, and then at the end of that 20 years, basically, your tenure in this farm has come to an end. Now, whether or not that we can get an extension on that, that's to be seen yet. But we know that we've got this 20-year period to basically farm this farm and build up asset, build up capital, and obviously make plans for the future. So that our children aren't going to automatically get a farm, if that makes sense. So if they do want to
No.
farm, we're going to have to look at ways, if we want to support them, how they do that. I think for me, I'm a big believer in that I think you should always go work for somebody else, if that makes sense as well. So you should always go, if you want to go farming, don't just stay on the family farm, go work for somebody else, or go work abroad, or go work in another industry and see how things are done and bring that experience back home. Because I think sometimes, yeah, if you kind of start off and never leave the farm, you just don't get to see. And I'm saying this, this is, I mean, some people don't get the choice, and I'm aware of that. There's a lot of generational pressure put on farmers here,
Yeah.
and they may have wanted to go traveling and work elsewhere, and they may have been kind of forced into the route of farming. I'm completely aware of that. And, for some people, that's a really big burden. But I think, yeah, if you do have the opportunity to, I'd always want to see my kids kind of maybe go off elsewhere first. And if they do want to come back farming, that's great. And we will try and support them like however we can to get into agriculture.
What sorts of things are they into? What are their hobbies?
Well, the eldest, she's the academic as well, but she also loves cooking. Actually, she's a really good chef, so she's actually just got a job cooking at the local pub. But she, at the moment, she wants to be a veterinarian. So that's kind of, yeah, that's where her mind's thinking at the moment. But she's really into her natural sciences and things like that as well. The middle one is sports mad, and I think if she could quit school, play sport full time, and farm, she would be happy. She plays rugby, loves rugby, plays netball, plays like hockey for school. She wants to play hockey outside of school, and I've just said there are not that many Saturdays in a weekend, so you can pick your 1 or 2 sports, and that's it. So no, she absolutely loves sports, that one. And she's one of those natural farm kids though. She'll come out. You don't have to ask her or nag her. She just comes out and does stuff. So she'll go and fork up silage, or she loves being outside and being with livestock. And then the youngest, he also, well, he's probably too smart for his own good, actually. I shouldn't say that. He's very switched on, really good at maths. Probably gets a bit bored at school, I think, maybe because he's not being, yeah, challenged enough, actually. But yeah, again, he loves rugby, loves sports, and he's very switched on. I kind of see him almost being like an engineer or mechanic or something. I'll always remember the story. He never spoke a lot when he was younger. He talked loads, but he would, around strangers, he was quite quiet and he wouldn't talk a lot. But we did talk. It was like they were always gobsmacked by what came out. And I remember he'd come out to the yard. He must have only been about like 3.5, and we were servicing one of the balers or something. And I think we were getting him to watch, and one of the guys hadn't done something. And he just literally came out and he said, "You forgot to put that washer on behind that bolt when you put that back on the chamber or something." One of the guys was just like, he's 3 and he's watched me do that and figured out that I've done it wrong or something. So yeah,
Wicked.
he's always been really into yeah, kind of looking at how things work and understanding that aspect. So yeah, I think that's just the way his brain is wired. So they've probably all each got their own individual, I guess, strengths and skills if they were ever going to go into agriculture, I guess, and it's how you apply that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And like we were saying earlier about the range of opportunities within agriculture, or even if just that force of being surrounded by it as you're growing up, in informing how you look at life and how you approach problems. I've had this conversation now so many times with different people over the last 12 months about it takes a certain type of individual to thrive in farming. And that's when I set up this podcast, I wanted to hear people's stories and what it was that kept them in farming. And coming to the realization that it's a different set of priorities. It's an approach to problem solving. It's a creativity. It's a concerted effort to solve problems. That just seems to be the common thread running through people in farming, um, despite the challenges.
Yeah, I
So,
think. Oh,
sorry.
it's the reward though. I think it's actually the reward sometimes you get from that. I think that's just yeah, it's just wonderful. I think.
Yeah, having a start middle. So being an office dweller for as long as I was, one of the frustrations was nothing you seemed to do had a start, middle, or an end, or there'd be a start and there'd be a project that would run on, and then it might end up in a I don't know, a campaign or a product or a service or whatever, but it just was insufferable if you were of the mind if you're a completist and you wanted to sort of say, I've achieved X, there it is, it's been well received, poorly received, whatever it is, move on to the next thing. But yeah, there were just some turgid days of shuffling things around and emailing, projects that would just go on and on, and then get checked. Then you get a new CEO and it will be all change again. So last year's priorities all just went out the window. Anyway, that was my little moan about it. Um, what do you have in plan for this year on the farm? So you just come off the back of calving. What does the rest of the year look like?
Yeah, so we're not quite finished carving yet. So we start sort of we've actually changed our system since we've moved down. So traditionally we were very much like a February spring calving suckler herd, but really quickly learning that we don't have as many buildings, or we were prioritizing buildings for calf rearing. We really, and again, it's cost, isn't it? I
Mm.
think if you can have a really low cost of production grass-based system, that's where your margins are going to be made. So we've changed our calving to sort of early March, mid-March through April, May. So actually we're trying to calve when the weather's a bit better. We don't need to house the cows for calving, and we can kind of calve as that peak growth grass period is happening on our farm.
Uh-huh.
So that's been sort of a change, I guess, that we've taken, and we've been sort of adapting as we've been here for the last 3 seasons. We're bang smack in the middle of calf rearing, so yeah, it's always a bit manic at the moment. We tend to do two big blocks, so we sort of do about 350 in the spring and 350 in the autumn, and that is very much just it's very repetitive work. It's you're feeding your calves morning and evenings, so that doesn't change, if that makes sense, and you've got that time in between feeding to do all your other tasks on the farm, so your grazing planning, your
Mm.
fencing, any sort of spring drilling we have to do. We grow a lot of whole crop, and undersow that quite often as well with herb lays. So it's quite nice now. I think within year 3 it's almost like we've got a system. You've kind of we've done a lot of our reseeding and getting things going as we got the farm going, and it's kind of almost now like, right, we're going into year 4. Hopefully it's just going to be quite a nice steady year, if that makes sense. But equally, the beef industry has been really successful the last couple of years. We had that price hike in spring 2025 last year. Beef at £7 a kilo, and I think when prices are good, it's time to take that money and invest into your business. So for us, it's we want to look at expanding. Ideally, I'd like to be able to rear 1,000 calves this year. So we know that we've got to sort of make some changes infrastructure wise on the farm to sort of accommodate that.
Mm.
And I'm a big fan of lean management. My husband hates me, but I like things to work well. I think my one vice is I get frustrated when things are like really clunky and awkward to do. And I don't know if that's just because when you've got a lot to do, you want things to work well and like a well-oiled machine because your
Mm,
time's valuable. So I always like things to work in a really effective way. So yeah, we've just been sort of tweaking a few bits and pieces of the routine just to make things kind of smooth and flow really easily. And that also means then when you do like hire and staff as well, at the end of the day, you don't want to employ someone doing a job that's really awkward and horrible, do you? So you want to make sure that everything works well because you want to bring people in and train them up or get them into the industry, and you want them to enjoy their job. You don't want them to go,
mm.
oh God, I don't want to go do that because it's it's really hard work. So I
Yeah,
think
they're hard to
that's like
manage.
yeah, it's really key, I think, to just make sure, whatever work processes you've got, they're they're really well thought through. So that way, if you do have staff coming in, they're also having an enjoyable time on your farm as well, I think, too. So, and I think for us, it's just, if we can finish the fencing, we've been using countryside stewardship and capital grants for that. And I think that will just be like a game changer for us, having the whole entire farm fenced. It's just going to mean that our pasture utilization and pasture sort of management can be really effective, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, for us, we are a grass-based system, and pasture is key. That's like key to our profitability. Basically, we don't feed concentrates to the cows. We finish like straight off grass and herbal lays. We don't supplementary feed anything. Obviously, the calves, when they're being reared, they are being fed a concentrate. But as soon as we've got them weaned, we like to get them outside and they go out grazing basically. So we're very much, I suppose it's like a low input system, but it's a high input in terms of management, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
like a
It's a
high,
system in
yeah,
its truest
exactly.
sense.
Yeah.
When you talk about calf rearing, here comes a dumb question potentially. So one of the things I was surprised to learn about last year was the move in dairy parlours to automation, and visited a couple of farms and seen that in action. When you talk about calf rearing and they're fed on concentrate in the shed, and you're saying the regime is morning and evening, and you can't move from that. Is there an argument for automating that in the same way as milking has been automated to remove the manual element? Was that completely dumb?
No, no, no. So that's actually really interestingly. So I've actually had an automatic milk machine since 2011. So I've had an automatic feeder for a very long time. So we're a hybrid system, if that makes sense. So one of our calf sheds is set up. We have an automatic machine. Those have sort of feed stations, and every calf is given an individual kind of electronic tag that can be read by that machine, and that calf can come in and have his allocated milk, during the day. So it obviously the computer has a program. They can't just go in there and drink it all in one go like a small child would if they saw a pack of sweets in the cupboard.
Mm.
It sort of, it breaks it down in terms of the volume of feed and when they can have it. So I've embraced automation, I guess, I got that when I was probably 22, I suppose. It was a very expensive purchase back then.
Mm.
Having looked at the prices now, it's very, very expensive now with inflation and parts. But to say that that milk machine is now how many years old? 14, 15 years old, and it's still going. So the technology, I think they're brilliant. I think the biggest thing for us is why we haven't fully gone down that system yet is it's a big cost in terms of investment. And I know you can turn around and weigh it up and go, oh, it's labor versus this. And I suppose automation like robots, there are definitely still some block carving systems that use robots and they use them incredibly well. Really impressed by them. But I think for me, it's that throughput. So when you invest in a piece of technology like automation for that robot or an automatic feeder, in my view, then that equipment that might cost you 20 grand, 25 grand these days, your return on investment to pay that off would then mean that you probably have to up your production, if that makes sense. So at the moment, we work with block calving farms because that works for us. We've got two kind of key busy periods on the farm, and then we've got periods where we're not busy, if that makes sense. We've not got calves that on milk, so it gives us a bit of a break as well.
Mm.
Whereas I think if I went out and brought two new milk machines and automated the whole system, I'd quickly feel that I would then need to be rearing calves 12 months of the year, if that made sense, in order
Yeah.
to make sure that machine was running constantly. I was paying it back, getting that return on investment for the capital invested into that. And I think in the future, who's to say that might actually happen? You never know. But I think at the moment for us, just building a farm, we've got 3 kids and a family. And I think for us, it was more just this fits around our family and our lifestyle at the moment.
Yeah.
But I
The
think
rhythm
automation,
to it.
yeah, yeah, automation is amazing though. And I think, yeah, you go to other countries and see where it's being invested and how it's being used in other industries as well in agriculture. And I think, yeah, it is a game changer for labor, but it doesn't take away from good stockmanship though.
No, I'm sure. I think there's this there's a sense of pride in maintaining some of the traditions in farming. And I completely understand that in the same way as if you owned a piece of land, you're proud to live in it, you're rooted in it in every sense. And the difficulty is in looking at what might be to retain it. It's this battle of what am I giving up? So I had I had it completely expected to hear more people naysaying, the development of technologies and where it can be incorporated. So I was like really surprised to start to uncover who is using technology or automation that sort of complements the existence of the traditional values of the farm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think there's so many different types of technology, and it's tricky because some farmers are always going to be old-fashioned pen and paper farmers and have notes and have lists, and but technology doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be, oh, all of a sudden I've got an automated milking system or I've got an automated calf feeding system. It could just be little things that you're using. I know, within the dairy industry, the use of heat detection and things like cow management tags and collars, those have been a game changer. And it's not huge technology, but it's something that can, with the data from that, it can increase the efficiencies in your business. You can pick up on cows on heat quicker. You can tighten your calving blocks. You can shorten your days, your calving interval. But again, it helps pick up on some of those health aspects. You
Yeah.
can pick up on rumination, you can pick up on mastitis and stuff like that. So I think techs and kind of, yeah, all that sort of technology within farming, I think farmers are embracing it. But they always say, don't they? There's always the early adopters, the very small percent, 5%, and there's kind of the next phase. And there's generally a big 50% in the middle that kind of they want to almost see it work on their neighbors, don't they? You want to see someone else do it. How's it
Before
affecting
they,
their business? And what's the bit, because it is scary. Change is scary for some people. I might be the opposite. I seem to embrace change and quite like like that.
you're
Um,
just weird.
yeah. Oh, I've been told that before, babe. Don't
You're from the
worry.
other side of the world, Laura.
But I think, I mean, don't change for the sake of change, but I think, yeah,
No.
being able to embrace something and not just dismiss it straight away and critique it, it is a skill to sort of, yeah, not have that kind of closed mindset about stuff like that sometimes.
Yeah, love it. Do you teach any classes or host any visits or anything? You're a font of knowledge, and I just think that your delivery is so positive that people could just like learn so much from you. Do you do anything in that regard?
No, we have got a barn on the farm actually. When you've got a to-do list that's a mile long. So we've got this lovely old stone barn on the farm, and I would love to get it sort of tidied up and have it as sort of, either a classroom access for schools. I do love doing things like Open Farm Sunday and sort of any events, yeah, where you get to talk to sort of children and the next generation about farming. Weirdly with teaching, I used to be a florist as well. So I used to teach a lot of workshops for floristry. So nothing to do with farming. Well, actually, no, in some aspects you were because you were talking about flower growing and understanding all that sort of stuff and sort of seasonal flowers. But yeah, that was the closest I ever came to teaching. But I loved that. Absolutely loved being able to teach people how to do a skill or a craft, but explain like all the processes behind it and why you did it. So yeah, no, it's maybe it's something I need to think about a bit more.
Well, move it up your to-do list because yeah, I think you should have a volunteer paint party. So anybody wants a couple of days down in Truro in the summer sun and come and tidy up that barn, get it going. It's a
Oh
brilliant
yeah,
idea.
no, brilliant. Yeah.
Well, it's lovely talking to you. I'm going to let you go, and I'm sure you've got tons of stuff to be getting on with. The weather's going to turn again a little bit this week, which is unfortunate because we all thought that spring was here on the weekend, but clocks forward this weekend. And yeah, it's been terrific to talk to you. Finally, let's not leave it so long next time.
No, it's been great to finally actually be able to catch up and talk. And yeah, you're right. Hopefully we just have a very brief blip on the weather and we're back to spring sunshine and that positivity I suppose we need in agriculture.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, thanks a lot, Laura. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
My enormous thanks to Laura for squeezing me into her long to-do list. I really hope she finds some time to upgrade that old barn so that she can share her knowledge and enthusiasm for the dairy beef sector with others. If you want to find out more about the research Laura undertook on her Nuffield farming study, why not check out her presentation to conference back in December? You'll find a link to that video in the show notes. Well, that's all for today. Next week, I'll be talking to a farmer with a huge span of responsibilities, supporting his own farming operation, as well as contributing to the wider farming industry. I hope you can join me for that. But as always, whenever and wherever you're tuning in from, if it is past your bedtime, then perhaps it's time to turn in. Until next time.